research, 90% of the plastic particles found in the sample were nanoplastics, and only 10% were larger microplastics. This is the punchline. Jill Kulora, a spokeswoman for the International Bottled Water Association. It's sad that there even is such a thing. Said in an email that there is both a, quote, is both a lack of standardized methods and no scientific consensus on the potential health impacts of nano and microplastic particles. Therefore, media reports about these particles in drinking water do nothing more than unnecessarily scare consumers. Wow.
Laid it down.
Plastic bottles are safe and effective.
You think those Exxon Mobil lobbyists are tough? Wait till you meet the bottled water bitch there. Straighten your ass out.
Yeah, well, actually, okay. So this is kind of a related story. I made a joke about making the frogs gay, but actually there's an element of this here. Because, you know, men's sperm counts have been dropping since 1970. And you are getting higher incidence of genital mutation, which is related to this drop in testosterone and sperm counts. So, yeah, like that whole, like, making the frogs gay and all that.
I was about to say, we should have had Alex Jones on for this.
We should have had him
on.
on.
We were doing this today.
We have a contact for Alex.
We do.
Right?
We do.
We'll see if he'll come on now.
Right now.
He's not doing anything, is he? Oh, yeah, I can tell you all about those fucking amphibian freaks. So, no, they do hypothesize because they don't know why, but one of the most prominent theories is that it's the plastics that are affecting the endocrine system. They actually hypothesize that because it's cumulative, each generation starts at a lower level of testosterone and sperm levels, and then they pass that on to their kids, who then are at a lower level. If that continues, men are eventually going to go sterile. So some people do believe it's these microplastics. I don't. You would think drinking water out of a plastic bottle is healthy. I mean, it's funny that this comes up when I'm here in California, because New York was always known for having this great tap water. So I never saw people not drink the tap water until the first time I came out to California. I was visiting my father. And back then, you didn't really have the bottled water wasn't a thing. Everybody had water coolers in their house. I was like, why the fuck do you have water coolers? Because the tap water was so nasty. Nobody would drink it. And that continues out here, only now it's more bottled water.
Well, it's everywhere except for New York. I mean, New York is famous around the world for its clean tap water. But the late, great George Carlin, who recently made a posthumous cameo in AI form, he used to do this great bit. He did this bit in one of his HBO shows where he has a glass of water on the stage with him. He holds it up. He says, "Here's some local tap water," to the audience. "I'm assuming this is okay to drink?" And every time they would say, "No, no, no." And then he'd say, "I was messing with you there. I was setting you up." He says, "I do that everywhere I go as an experiment to see, can I find one place in the country, outside of New York City, obviously, that says, yes, please imbibe in our natural tap water. It is pure and it is good." He says, "I never see that anymore." And, you know, he saw that as a sign that the whole system was breaking down, which is one of many, many reasons why he is so sorely missed. Could you imagine what he'd have to say about these things?
Oh, my God. That is a voice we really need right now.
I mean, he was saying that shit in the 90s when everyone, it was a
everyone
party.
Thought, this is America.
Right, that's it. Paradise. Utopia's here. And he was predicting all this stuff in the 90s.
Yeah, this is because in California, the water, by the time it gets to LA, it's gone through every like farmland and cow pasture between the Rockies and here. So it's got a lot of stuff going on. And even, I hate to say it, although it still is the cause of our high quality pizza, is the flavor of the New York water. It's not as good as it used to be. Not as good as it used to be. It used to have like this really, really fresh taste.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to go to my grandmother's house. My grandmother lived in the Bronx. I lived up in the Hudson Valley, so our water was crap. And I would go to my grandmother's house, and she'd be like, "You want a soda?" I'm like, no, I want some of that good water. I don't have good water. I can get soda back home.
Right.
I can't get that New York tap water.
A kid who wants water. Yeah, it's not good like that anymore. It doesn't taste like that anymore because our infrastructure is breaking down. This is something we might do a story about this on our show on Due Dissidence. Since I left New York, the fucking place is coming apart. There's been an earthquake and 2 subway derailments. It's you know, this is what happens when you put everything into tax cuts. All right, to super chats.
All right, the gets prime. Different plastics have different hardnesses. Harder material tends to mean more brittle, which means more breakages from deformations, including creasing and thermal expansion. Thank you. Gets prime. Warren is back for you, Keaton. Hey, Keaton, if I couldn't stand the jabs, would I really spend my time interacting with 2 New York Jews?
Good point, my friend.
All right, Warren.
Very good point.
Back to Russ.
All right, so this is a very mercifully short story for my deathly ill wingman here. So this is from a few days ago, but we thought this would be a very cheerful way to end the show. Pro-Palestine activists throw red paint on U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's car as he leaves his home in the U.S. state of Virginia amid chants of shame on you. So, hey, man, just bathe in the glory of these activists throwing paint at this fucking asshole.
On you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
I think we've lost the love of the people, sire. Isn't that the cop from Crown Heights?
Yeah, it looks like it.
We don't do this in America. Yeah, that's when you know the people are with you, huh? So what do you think, Keaton? You gonna do some of that action in New Hampshire if you see the right people?
If I see the right people, I don't know. I'm packing pretty light. The paint is pretty heavy, but look, that's how you have to do it. Our friend Jose Vega gets in people's faces. I mean, you have to, within the bounds of the law, obviously, peacefully make your presence known, make your voice heard. You know, there is no other way to resist, really. I mean, okay, one thing I'll say, you notice they put out that poll, like, I don't know, this is probably early November, asking the American people who supported a ceasefire. You notice the answer came back 66%. That was probably about 15 to 20,000 corpses ago. Right. Notice they didn't do a follow-up poll. Yep. We haven't heard another poll about that because they want to suppress that. And part of why they are able to run out the clock on Gaza, as they're trying to do, obviously, is that they feel like they can just hold the ball and run the ball until Israel is done doing what they want to do. And the only way to stop that, and you know, this is not a sure thing. Obviously, you can only speak as loud and as often as you can. That's all you can do, and I think people have a responsibility to do that.
So you hear that? Be the first kid on your block to terrorize the Secretary of State within the bounds of the law. Always keep it legal. All right. I think that is our show. Don't forget, we have a few shows before this, but we mentioned it a little bit. Keaton will be on the ground in New Hampshire next week to cover the criminal miscreants over there, all fighting to grab the brass ring like they do. Yes. And on the next show, we will have Chris made a very funny video. We will have that. Today, I did not want to make Keaton, who's like at death's door here, sit through an extra segment. So we'll have that on Monday. Folks, enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much, Keaton. Hey, Keaton, where can people find you?
You can find me at Do Dissidents. Plug that in the search bar when you're done, and go join our Rumble channel, and go subscribe to our YouTube channel. If I don't make it through this illness, if I succumb to this illness, it's very important to my wife that I leave to her and the family a YouTube channel with at least 40,000 subscribers. So try and make that happen for me, will you? Go give us a subscribe.
That's our own little Make-A-Wish Foundation gesture.
Well, my kids love those unboxing videos. Like they're really into them, and they could probably do that. And they're twins, so they're cute and they're funny. So if the YouTube channel has enough organic reach, they should be able to convert Do Dissidents into a toy unboxing channel, and I think they'll do very well. So that's why it's important.
Listen, man, I keep saying we need an unboxing sister channel of, like, you know, radical paraphernalia. Like, oh, look what the Black Panthers sent us.
Right.
I think that could take it. That's what this space is lacking.
Exactly.
All right.
Hey, look, anthrax.
Yeah. Safe and effective anthrax.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a good weekend, folks. And to Misha for Super Chats.
All right, we can actually go to a quick break, and I'll get Super Chat set up.
All right. We are switching. Turn off the mariachi music. Why don't you put some, like, Nas? Or, I guess you can't. That'd be copyrighted. Get Killer Mike to make you a track, Jimmy, or something. What is that music? All right. I had this idea earlier. Let's see. It's really hard to talk when I can hear myself. Because the monitoring is not immediate. But I like to hear it so I can, like, mix it in so it's not too loud. All right. Let's see. This is what I wanted. Right here. Copy. Streamlabs. Browser source. Okay, refresh current. Let's see if that'll work. Okay, I just learned this part. I can't hear the audio out of that. Does it not work with YouTube? That was on Rumble. Okay, let's see. Where's the... There was a button that was like, said interact. Interacts. Okay. Skip. It has no audio. Huh. I bet YouTube turns it off somehow. Maybe. Maybe I could just download that one. I'll do that. Let's open up the downloader. Like that. That's annoying though. I think I could turn maybe this on. Will that work?
Loss is in fact caused by the consumption of 5 neurotoxic chemicals used extensively within the American food industry. These neurotoxic chemicals create a brain rot that alters your ability to properly speak and destroys mental clarity before completely erasing all of your memory.
There we go. Hey, that works. All right. So
hello and welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. We're back after our holiday vacation. I hope you guys had a nice one. Thank you so much for joining us now. We've got a great guest for you tonight. If you remember, back in May of 2015, at the beginning of the Yemeni civil war, this Reuters article came out. Iranian ship carries aid and activists into the waters off Yemen. The article says, an Iranian cargo ship carrying aid and activists crossed into the Gulf of Aden on Sunday and will reach Yemen's Hodeida port on May 21st, Iranian media reported, in a challenge to Saudi-led naval forces controlling Yemeni waters. A coalition of Arab countries led by Saudi Arabia has imposed searches on all ships trying to enter Yemen in a bid to prevent weapons being smuggled to the Iran-allied Houthi rebel group, which controls much of the country, including Hodeida. Iran says the ship is carrying food, aid, medical volunteers, and 7 Western activists, one of whom was identified by the Tasnim news agency as Caleb Maupin, a native of Ohio who has campaigned against war and the U.S. financial system.
Okay.
Now, this saga of this ship was subsequently followed by various news organizations throughout its voyage. And tonight, we're actually joined by Caleb Maupin, who's going to tell us about how he ended up on this boat and what happened, as well as give us more insight into the Yemeni Houthis. The Houthis have taken a central role in the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict by doing really what the Saudis were doing to them back in 2015. They're now the ones stopping the ships, this time ships that are bound for Israel. Now, if you haven't heard of Caleb Maupin, he's an interesting guy, whether you agree with him politically or not. Caleb is the founder of the Center for Political Innovation. He's a community activist opposing police brutality, war, supporting prisoners, and teaching classes on Marxism. In New York City, he became a media spokesperson for former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark's International Action Center, representing Clark during the Occupy Wall Street protests, the Syrian civil war, and the 2014 Euromaidan coup in Ukraine. He is the author of numerous books.
So I was going to say, I am going to listen to Caleb, and then I'm going to clean up, and I'm going to do a stream for an hour or two on a certain president killing Gonzalo Lira. So I'll be back for that. But first, I want to try this out, see how it works.
Books, including his latest, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. Caleb Maupin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure, glad to be here.
So let's first talk about how you got on this ship. This ship was coming from Iran. Give us a little bit of background of what the events were that unfolded where you ended up on this ship.
What in the world? This is so weird. I am not used to ads at all.
Well, it was May of...
I don't know how to share a browser source from my premium account. It doesn't have that link. So we're going to make this work this time. Maybe I should just download it. Maybe that would be less annoying. Next ad, we'll download it after this game. And we'll start from there. All right?
2015, and I had been to Iran for a conference of independent thinkers and filmmakers who opposed Israel. And I'd been at this conference, and I'd made some friends in Iran. And, I was involved in all kinds of different, social justice activism in the United States. And I had worked with Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. Attorney General. And I had been to this conference in Iran. And so I got a call on May 1st of 2015 from Iran. And they said, hey, we're planning a humanitarian mission to deliver medical aid to Yemen with the Red Crescent Society. Would you like to accompany the mission? And I said, sure. I thought this was a great opportunity. So I got on a plane to Iran, and, I got off the plane in Iran, and I found out this was quite a big deal. We ended up going to Bandar Abbas, which is in the south of Iran. It's a port city, and we waited for a few days, and then all kinds of international media was there. And at the last minute, there were some people who were going to go on the ship and pulled out. They were a little nervous. But I got on the ship, and I ended up being the only American on the ship, and we were headed for Yemen, and it was quite exciting. There were lots of Iranian doctors. There were members of the Iranian parliament. on board surgeons, the technicians of an operating theater. We had a whole bunch of flour and wheat, medical supplies. It was a very, very exciting time.
So who called you from Iran and said, hey, head over here, we're going to put you on this ship?
It was somebody who'd been involved with the conference that I had gone to.
Okay. Was it an Iranian government official? Was it?
No, it was somebody who was involved with some kind of nonprofit in Iran. It was a conference that they did called the New Horizon Conference, and the leader of the conference was an Iranian filmmaker named Nader Talibzadeh, who's now deceased. And it was the New Horizon Conference. They did a number of these conferences over the years. Yeah, and I got to go to 2 of them, and the first one I went to was in 2014, and then it was the following spring they invited me to go on the ship.
Okay, so you get on this ship. They make a big deal out of it. Are they making a big deal out of it because they know this is the one ship we're sending in from Iran? It's going to be intercepted, supposedly intercepted, right? That's the idea. But then Iran was saying we're not going to allow this one to be intercepted. So,
right,
but they were announcing that this ship was coming.
Right. The Saudis were enforcing a full naval blockade of Yemen at the time. They were not allowing anything to get in, not even humanitarian stuff from the Red Cross, from the UN. And that's a crime under international law. You cannot block the delivery of humanitarian aid. And the Red Crescent Society is recognized by the United Nations. It's the Islamic world's version of the Red Cross. And they are an officially recognized international aid organization. So basically, the Red Crescent Society of Iran said we are going to challenge the Saudis.
My thoughts on it?
Force this blockade. We are going to try to bring medical aid, flour,
tune in later.
water,
I'm going to be talking about that
to Yemen.
On,
we're going to the port of Hodeida, which is in area controlled by the Houthi Ansarullah forces, and we're going to deliver this medical aid. And it was really a big deal. There were members of the Iranian parliament there. There were all kinds of doctors, and there was a German citizen on the ship, and there was a French citizen on the ship, and I was the only American. And it was quite an exciting moment.
Right.
And it ended up creating quite an international incident. I didn't quite know what I was getting into because almost as soon as we departed, Israel and Saudi Arabia both claimed that we were smuggling weapons to Yemen, which we were not doing. There were no weapons on the ship, and that was later revealed when they unloaded all the supplies in Djibouti. So we were not smuggling weapons in any way, but Israel and Saudi Arabia both basically said that they considered this to be a military weapons smuggling operation, and that they would take action against the ship. So I was on this ship with the understanding that we could be targeted. So there you go.
Yeah. So the reports are that the ship was escorted by Iranian warships. Then later reports said that there were no Iranian warships, but then later reports said that there were Iranian warships, after all, that were joining later on, it seemed, during the journey. What was the truth there?
I never saw any Iranian warships. I was aboard the ship, and we saw American planes that flew overhead and kind of like nosedived and were trying to kind of threaten us, but we never saw any Iranian warships that I can recall. They could have been in close vicinity, but you also have to remember that, we were going through the Gulf of Aden. That's an area where there's a lot of pirates, the Somalian pirates and other things. And so I think that, if there were somebody, perhaps trailing from a distance, that would have been to make sure we didn't have an issue, because we really had very little to defend ourselves with. If some pirates had tried to board the ship, we would have been kind of sitting ducks. And,
right.
ISIS was operating in the Gulf of Aden at the time, too. So, if there were some ships that were in proximity, it was probably just in case there was some need to, protect us.
Yeah. How many days was this journey on the ship?
13 days. And it was quite an experience for me because, I'm a product of our great American educational system, and I only speak one language, English. Most of the Iranians on the ship did not speak the English language, and there was only a handful of people that could speak English with me. But you're on a ship. You don't have anywhere to go. You don't have much to do. And so, you have a lot of time to talk. And they really wanted to talk to me about religion. They're all Shia Muslims. They're, believers in the Islamic Revolution and the Supreme Leader. And I'm from a small town in Ohio, and I grew up, as a Christian. I had been in a communist organization, and my faith had kind of, I had gotten to the point that I was more or less an atheist. But I was on this ship, and they were just constantly asking me about the Bible, and asking me about my Christian upbringing. How do Christians see Moses? How do Christians see Abraham? And all of my religious training started coming back to me. And it was a deeply spiritual experience. I mean, for me, being on the ship, I really reconnected with my Christian faith, because I'm sitting there on this ship, you know, fearing for my life in the center of an international incident. And I'm surrounded by a number of people that are just constantly, you know, questioning me about the Bible, questioning me about Christianity and religion. It was a very important moment. I apparently, and I don't know, I cannot confirm this, but I'm told that John Kerry, you know, at the time, John Kerry was negotiating with Javad Zarif, the Iran nuclear deal. And John Kerry was very angry about the ship, and very angry that I was on the ship, apparently, because Javad Zarif had not told John Kerry about this ship. And so I was informed of this on the ship, that, you know, Javad Zarif and John Kerry had a phone call about this ship. John Kerry is really, really angry that you're on board the ship. And that, you know, that was kind of a shocker for me too. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're in the Pentagon trying to figure out if a military strike on this ship is possible or something. It was quite a moment for me. And I'm really glad I had the opportunity to really engage with, you know, these Iranians that are deeply religious and deeply anti-imperialist, and talk about what America is like, talk about what, you know, Iran and their revolutionary tradition is like, learn about the Houthis and the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen. And, you know, it was a deeply moving experience. I tell people I'm not the same person that I was when I got off the ship as when I got on it. It changed me deeply, in a deeply spiritual way.
Well, I want to get to that and talk about those changes. But you said that there was a French national on the ship, and what was the other? Who was the other?
A German national.
A German, okay.
A German.
So did it occur to the three of you that you were human shields, I suppose, like as a way to frame it, where the Western countries would not bomb this ship or would not sanction a bombing of the ship, knowing that there were citizens from the West on board this ship?
Well, that was my hope, because I knew that the people of Yemen were starving, and that the people of Yemen were being bombed round the clock by Saudi Arabia. I mean, they were just bombing them and killing them in mass. People were fleeing, trying to get out of there. There was a food blockade, a medical blockade, and the idea that I might enable food to get delivered to these folks with the Red Crescent Society, that sounded like a good thing. You know,
Yeah.
If I could be there and help make sure that this food was actually delivered, that seems like a great, you know, moral, ethical thing to do. So human shield wasn't the words that I would use necessarily. I saw myself there kind of as a journalist to report on what was happening. I also saw myself there as an activist, you know, to support the people of Yemen against the U.S.-sponsored Saudi onslaught that was, you know, attacking them and killing them. But, you know, if you want to use that word human shield, I don't think there was anything wrong with that. And you know, we need the people of Yemen needed medical aid, and it was being blocked.
Yeah. So did the ship make it?
No. The day we were supposed to arrive, the Saudis bombed the port of Hodeidah 8 times in a single day. And, like, there was no port for us to dock into. They just bombed the port over and over and over again. A number of dock workers were killed. In addition to that, there were Sudanese mercenaries that had positioned themselves near the port. So if we had pulled up, they would have unloaded on us with rocket launchers and attacked the ship with rocket launchers. Several days after our ship was supposed to arrive, they bombed the medical university in Hodeidah because it had been, you know, we'd been planning to deliver medical supplies to the medical university, to the doctors there. And they murdered at least 23 medical students in Hodeidah in retaliation for their willingness to cooperate with our humanitarian mission.
So the ship ended up in Djibouti.
Yes, and Djibouti is an African country that has relations with the United States, and the Iranians couldn't get off the ship. So it was me and the French guy who we could get off the ship because he had a French passport and I had an American passport. The Iranians couldn't get off the ship, so they had to stay on the ship. They were able to unload all the medical supplies and all the food and all the other materials that were on the ship and hand it over to the United Nations Relief Works Agency. But we were not happy about that because the UN Relief Works Agency is notoriously corrupt. And there was a lot of allegations of them playing a partisan role in the Yemeni conflict, basically opposing Ansar Allah and being on the side of the Saudi-aligned forces. And so by handing over our medical supplies and our food, we were kind of giving it to forces we didn't really trust. The other thing that's worth noting is that, when we did unload the ship, all the allegations that we were shipping weapons to Yemen were debunked. And I believe the Financial Times said that we achieved, or that Iran had achieved, a propaganda coup. Because it turned out we didn't have any weapons on the ship. Give me a break. I mean, we're trying to bring medical supplies to people in a war-torn country with the Red Crescent Society. They accuse us of sending weapons. And then when we unload our ship and there's no weapons, they call that a propaganda coup. Give me a break.
So the ship arrives in Djibouti. The United States has a base there. Did it go to the U.S. base or did it go somewhere else?
We docked into the port, and then from there I was able to leave the port, and then I went to the only place where you can buy an airline ticket in cash, which is inside the U.S. Embassy. So I went into the, it's like the hotel compound where the U.S. Embassy is in Djibouti, and me and the French guy bought our airline tickets in cash, and then we went to the airport. We were in Djibouti for less than 24 hours, I think.
What happened to the German guy?
The German guy, from my understanding, he had after it was clear that we were not going to Yemen, he had an argument with the Iranian hosts, and he asked to leave the ship, and a water taxi picked him up, and he left. I think that was when we were already in Djibouti, but he left early. He didn't leave with us.
Okay. And so the Iranians were not allowed off the ship. Djibouti, though, has other bases there. China, at the time, did China have their base there, or...?
China had not set up their base yet. This was 2015. But there was talk that China had announced, I think, that they were planning one. But yeah, what I thought was neat in Djibouti was that, this Iranian ship had docked in Djibouti, and a lot of the dock workers at the port were Muslim. And they weren't really letting us off the ship. We just kind of sat there for a couple days in the harbor. But all these dock workers had heard there was an Iranian ship, so they would walk by the port and they would see our ship, and they would pump their fists and shout Allahu Akbar and pump their fists at us like they loved Iran. I thought that was kind of neat. These are kind of working class folks that work in a port, and they're Muslims, and they just thought it was so awesome there was an Iranian ship there. So that was pretty neat.
After you made it back to the United States, did anybody sit you down? Were there any state officials saying, "What the hell were you doing, Caleb?"
That was dumb.
Wow. There's a long story there. So I didn't come back to the United States for another month. Afterwards, I went back to Iran. I made a documentary film in Iran, and when I got back to Iran, they took me to see the Supreme Leader, Khamenei. I was there in a crowd of 20,000 people to see the Supreme Leader of Iran speak. And I was the only American. It was the anniversary of the death of Khomeini. Supreme Leader Khamenei gave a speech, and I was in this auditorium of 20,000 people. And I was in this auditorium, and I'm in the back with a lot of African diplomats, Chinese diplomats, but we're in an auditorium full of, this is the hardcore of the Islamic Revolution. There's teenagers in military uniforms. There's people from Lebanon with Hezbollah flags and others. I'm the only American, and I'm standing there with my translator earpiece, and I listened to the Supreme Leader of Iran give an address. That moment, you can't describe being there. So the Supreme Leader of Iran came out, and he can only use one of his arms because of a bombing. I guess one of his arms is disabled, but he lifts his hand up to greet the crowd, and this whole audience, starts crying and yelling, and the men are saying the blood in my vessels belongs to the Supreme Leader. The blood in my vessels belongs to the Supreme Leader. That's what they chant when he enters the room. And it was just this amazingly emotional reaction to his presence. So I'm there, and I'm standing there, and he gives this speech. And at the time, the Iran nuclear deal negotiations are going on, and he's saying that he's allowing these negotiations to go on. He says, but Iran will never trust America. And he says, when we say America, we don't mean the American people. He said, we mean the American government. He said he opposed the crimes of the American police, what they do to African Americans, just like we oppose the crimes of ISIS. This is unacceptable to kill innocent people. And then I will never forget when he said, some people in Iran say we shouldn't say death to America, and we shouldn't call America the Great Satan anymore. He said, well, we do call America the Great Satan. We don't mean the American people. We mean the American system that sends war all over the world and keeps people in poverty. He says, we do say that America is the Great Satan. And then I was the only American in the room of 20,000 people who in unison just started chanting, death to America, death to America. And I'm standing there and I broke down. I just started crying. And it was just such an emotional moment for me because I knew that these people were not chanting against my family. They weren't chanting against the people in the town I grew up in. They're not chanting against me and the people that I know and love. They're chanting against a system that leads to war, death, and destruction all over the planet. And it breaks my heart that that's what it means to be an American. That's what America means to so many people around the world, is this evil system. And right now, the United States is falling apart. Our roads and bridges are falling apart. Our living standards are going down. Young people are dying from opioids. This system is also destroying the America that I know and that I love. And that moment was so pivotal for me, to look at the Supreme Leader, to hear this crowd of people chanting death to America. It was just a really, really pivotal moment for me. So it was a moment I will never forget. And then I also remember that afterwards, I was talking with this Iranian filmmaker who'd put on the conferences. And I remember we're driving around Tehran in his car, and he says to me, Caleb, do you ever think that Mel Gibson would ever want to come to Iran? And I immediately, of course, my mind goes to all the, the anti-Semitic things that Mel Gibson has said. And I'm saying, like, I don't know if you would really want that, He's like, no, it's not about that, Caleb. He says, have you ever seen Braveheart? And I said, yeah. And he said, have you ever seen The Patriot? I said, yeah. And he said, in Iran, we think those are the most Shia revolutionary movies that are out there. Those are the wildly popular movies in Iran because they're about sacrificing for what is right. They're about, people loving their family and their community and going out and fighting for justice. Those movies are just wildly popular in Iran because they're so much in line with our Shia revolutionary Islamic values. And I did a double take because I remembered when I was a kid, Braveheart was my favorite movie. And I thought, wow. And that just blew my mind for a moment. And I thought, there's so many things about the Iranian people and about the Islamic revolutionary movement that really, if average Americans from small towns like mine really could understand it, they would connect with a lot of it. And what was funny was when I first went to Iran, they assumed, because at the time my address, was Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn, and that I was working with Ramsey Clark, and I talk about, I'm a communist or whatever. So they assumed that I was, from like kind of a middle class demographic of, people that are just kind of, anti-war activists, that their parents were doing that, and their parents were SDS, and their parents were. But when they found out I was from a small town in Ohio, and they found out that I had a Christian upbringing, and that, that I grew up in a small town, they were like, Caleb, you don't know how important you are, because guys like you from small towns in Ohio, Christian guys like you, are the ones that want to kill us, that hate us, that think we're all terrorists and murderers. And it's people from small towns like you that are getting screwed right now by the American system. Wages are going down. And I thought about all the people that I went to high school with who died from opioids and the conditions. And I they didn't know how right they were. And that was an important moment for me too, because in the left circles that I'd been running in, I'd often been taught that I was a privileged white male. I should be ashamed of the fact that I grew up in a town full of conservatives, etc. And all of a sudden the Iranians were saying to me, well, no, that means you're special. You have something to offer. You can bring anti-imperialism to people in the United States who really need to hear it, who are really suffering now. And that really changed how I saw myself, and that was meaningful for me. So anyway, to answer your question, sorry, that was a roundabout thing I had to say, but to answer your question, so, I expected to be arrested as soon as I got back to the United States. I was anticipating being arrested. I called my friends in the United States. I had attorneys ready. I was expecting that when I got off the plane, I would be arrested. The Iranians did tell me, and I still don't know what to make of this, and this is just a bizarre thing. It sounds like something out of a horror movie or whatever. The Iranians said to me, they said, when you get to the United States, the Americans, they're going to try to get you to eat or drink something. And don't do it. And I just thought that was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. What in the world are they talking about? So anyway, I get on the plane and I fly to I think it was one of the UAE cities, Abu Dhabi. I fly to Abu Dhabi to change planes, and they pre-screen you for U.S. Customs to get on your plane to the United States in Abu Dhabi. And right at my gate, there's U.S. Customs. Hello, Mr. Maupin. We'd like to talk to you. I don't wait in line to go through U.S. Customs. They escort me to U.S. Customs. They take me to a room. They sit me down. And they're like, you know, so Caleb, tell us about this ship you were on and all of this. And of course, you know, I've been trained. I'm a U.S. citizen. They cannot block me from entering the United States. And so you only have to answer like your home and your address. So I'm saying on the advice of my attorney, I'm not going to answer that question. You know, I'm just saying, look, I don't have to answer your questions. I have the right to remain silent. So I don't answer their questions. So then I will never forget the U.S. Customs guy pulls a bottle of water out. He says, you look tired, Caleb. And he plants this bottle of water like right in front of me. He's like, you know, here's a bottle of water. You can drink this and, you know, you'll feel more relaxed and then I'll come back in. And he just plants this bottle of water in front of me. And I immediately thought of what I'd been told about don't eat or drink anything. They're going to try to get you to eat or drink something and don't eat or drink it. And so I thought, I'm not drinking that water. So they go in the other room and they leave me in this room for like an hour. And I'm sitting there in this room for like an hour. And then they walk back in and I haven't touched the bottle of water. And they're like, why didn't you drink the water? And I said, well, I'm not going to. And they're visibly like upset and shaken. They're like, he didn't drink the water. And I hear the U.S. Customs workers talking to each other like, he didn't drink the water. He didn't drink the water. I have no idea what was going on there, but that was a very strange moment. And I will never forget that. So, you know, I don't know what was going on there, but that was certainly a strange moment. And I came back to the United States and I never faced any legal trouble for it because, I mean, I was participating in a humanitarian mission. The Red Crescent Society is recognized by the Red Cross. We were not delivering weapons, as they alleged. We were definitely not doing that. I do know it is now illegal to go to the conferences that I went to in Iran, and everyone who did attend those conferences got a visit from the FBI, and so, but I'm no longer going to those conferences, and it's illegal, and I have a different life situation now, but I haven't been prosecuted.
Why are those illegal? Do you know what the reasoning is for that?
My understanding is that it's something related to there was like a U.S. Air Force intelligence person who defected to Iran, and that they're alleging she was some kind of Edward Snowden figure, and they're trying to say she was somehow recruited through those conferences or something. I don't really know the details of it. There was some kind of indictment, and I mean, what's very clear to me is that Barack Obama really wanted to sign the Iran nuclear deal. That was a really big part of the Obama administration. And it seems like there was a lot of back-channel communications, cultural exchanges between the USA and Iran that were going on at the time of the Iran nuclear deal negotiations and in the lead up to it. And I think these conferences were more or less set up so that Americans could go to Iran and meet Iranians, and Iranians could see Americans. And so I think that when the Trump administration came in, they did not want the Iran nuclear deal to ever be revived. And so part of that was making these conferences illegal. I don't know the details about the woman who was the Air Force intelligence officer. I just know nothing about that. I went there as an activist. I went there representing the International Action Center of former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark, who I was working for at the time. I went there as a journalist. So that's how I went to Iran. And I can't speak to anything. Nothing shady went on. I mean, the conferences that I went to, a couple of them were covered by ABC News, I believe, like ABC or CBS News, did stories about these conferences taking place in Iran. They seemed pretty transparent to me.
Okay, so let's get to the background of the Yemen civil war, what's going on there, and the importance, the significance of Iran in that civil war. From my understanding, and I'm sure from the understanding of many people, the reason why Saudi Arabia in particular, I'll let you kind of explain how they got to the point of the civil war and how it started breaking out, but Saudi Arabia got involved when they saw that the Houthis started to gain a lot of momentum and started to actually gain land. And the Houthis are Shia Muslims. Saudi Arabia is Sunni. The Houthis, Iran is also Shia Muslim. And so they saw the Houthis as a threat because if they were to have to share their southern border with a bunch of Shia Muslims who are aligned with Iran, Saudi Arabia and Iran have had historically very tense relations and proxy wars between the two of them. And so they saw their southern border, it was being threatened by Iran in their viewpoint, and that is why they got involved and started bombing. They did something very similar to what we're seeing in Gaza. They started to bomb civilians in Yemen. They were very much criticized for committing war crimes, that they were not just targeting actual military installations and the Houthi fighters, but they were targeting civilian areas. Killed close to 20,000 people, civilians from these strikes, and continue with American support. So the United States was, because the United States has also been in sort of proxy battles with Iran this entire time, so saw this as an Iranian expansion project. And that is why Saudi Arabia is involved. That's how they got involved. Now, Saudi Arabia and Iran have been trying to normalize or sort of reestablish themselves together to try to stabilize the Middle East. But can you give us more background? Was I wrong on that, or is that accurate? Can you fill in the gaps?
That's a very limited understanding of what's happening there. I mean, that's, you said a lot of true things there. You said some things that are kind of generalizations. So what you have to understand is that Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the world. By some estimates, it is the poorest country in the world. 28% of the population, over 1 in 4, live in poverty. And Yemen used to be divided. During the Cold War, South Yemen was a communist government. It was the Democratic People's Republic of Yemen, and North Yemen remained a capitalist, society. And after the Cold War, South Yemen dissolved, and now we have one Yemen. And South Yemen is a little bit more developed and industrialized than North Yemen. North Yemen is very mountainous. And the Houthi movement started with Hussein al-Houthi, who was he was a Muslim preacher, basically, who was friendly to South Yemen. He was religious, but he was friendly to the idea of having the Democratic People's Republic of Yemen. And in the 1990s, he started youth programs, summer camps, school programs, and this is in, the poorest country or one of the poorest countries in the world. So that's providing people with literacy. That's providing people with food. And in these mountainous areas of northern Yemen, he started this organization called the Young Believers. And they started kind of a religious revival movement. And they are Shias, but they're not the same type of Shias they are in Iran. In Iran, they are 12er Shias, meaning that they recognize 12 imams after the Prophet Muhammad. The Houthis are Zaydiya Shias, meaning that they follow an individual who led an armed uprising against the caliphate, Imam Zayd, who was a figure who led a failed uprising of the poor people against the Islamic caliphate when they felt it had been corrupt. They pray like Sunnis do. And they're in the mountains, and one of the beliefs of Zaydi Shias is that you must own a gun. They believe that it is your duty, that every man must have a gun to protect his household. And that's why if you ever see videos of a Houthi rally, they're waving their guns around, because that's part of their religion. You must have a gun. That is their belief. And these are, some of the poorest people up in the mountains. He's doing summer camps. He's training them. He builds this kind of religious revival movement, and so then in 2003, the USA invaded Iraq, and, he's very opposed to this, very, very opposed to it. And so he started having rallies against the U.S. invasion of Iraq, burning the American flag, saying things like death to Israel, death to America. And the official Yemeni government, which was at that point headed by the dictator Saleh, was freaked out by that. And so they went and they tried to take their guns away. They tried to disarm the Houthis. And that didn't go over real well, as their religion says they have the right to bear arms. So they got into a civil war with the actual, Yemeni government. And there was kind of civil war, and they carved out liberated territory, etc. And one of the central planks of the Ansar Allah, that's what they call themselves. Ansar Allah means supporters of God. That's the name of their movement. Houthi is kind of a slur. There's the Unification Church, the Korean religion in the United States. People call them Moonies. Well, that's not their name. They're called the Unification Church. Well, Houthi is kind of a slur. They followed this guy, their founder. His last name is Houthi. Houthi's a tribal ethnic name. Houthi's kind of a slang term for them, but they call themselves Ansar Allah, which means supporters of God. And one of their central teachings is belief in economic development, which I'm not sure if that translates really well. It sounds like kind of a cold term, economic development, but it means we're a deeply poor country and we have a huge amount of oil. We have a huge amount of oil that we're not doing anything with. That oil's staying in the ground. And if we took control of our country, if the foreign occupiers and the foreign governments stopped controlling us and we actually established economic independence, we could use that oil to make our country wealthier. And it was the movement is largely calling for public control of their natural resources so they can carry out economic development. Their logo actually it shows a hand holding a rifle, and that's for armed self-defense. The hand is supposed to be the hand of God. But parallel to the hand is a shaft of wheat, and that shaft of wheat stands for economic development. So the Houthis were this movement in northern Yemen that had carved out liberated territory, was fighting the government of Saleh. But then fast forward to 2011, then the Arab Spring happened. And all over the Arab countries, all over the Islamic world, there were uprisings and protests. And the dictator Saleh was forced to step down. And the Houthis already had this big army, and they controlled a big part of territory. So they were a big part of the Arab Spring uprising that was happening. But there were many other groups involved, such as the Southern Movement that wants to bring back the communist South Yemen, such as, there were Arab nationalists, Nasserists, Baathists. It was a wide, vast movement in Yemen in 2011, against the dictator Saleh, and calling for independence and opposing the drone strikes, because the USA had been carrying out drone strikes, and all over the country, people in Yemen were terrified of these drone strikes, terrified their kids might not come home from school, terrified that their neighborhood or their home might be hit by a drone. So there was this widespread uprising in 2011, and they formed these popular committees all over the country where people were debating and discussing the future of Yemen from different religious backgrounds, different political movements. So then the Saudis didn't like that, obviously. So they picked their guy, Mansour Hadi, a Yemeni guy who does business with Saudi Arabia, and they staged an election with only one man on the ballot. Mansour Hadi was the only guy on the ballot, and he was Saudi Arabia's handpicked guy. And, shockingly, he won, being the only guy on the ballot. And so they declared Mansour Hadi to be the new president. The revolution was over. Well, many people in Yemen didn't agree with that. And the Houthis already had this big army. And so they entered an alliance with people from the Southern Movement. They entered an alliance with Arab nationalists. They entered an alliance with a feminist group called the Arab Spring Party. It's a vast, they call it the Revolutionary Committee. And they started recruiting people from the regular Yemeni army, and they built up their forces. And in 2015, they marched into the capital, and they declared the Revolutionary Committee to be the Yemeni government. And at that point, Saudi Arabia said, no, Yemen is our property. That oil is staying in the ground in case we want to make money off of it in the future. And we're not going to have an independent country right on our southern border. And so they brought the military in there, and they rained death and destruction onto Yemen. And the cruise missiles and the bombs and the food blockade, and they brought in Pakistani mercenaries. You have to keep in mind, Saudi Arabia has the fourth largest military budget of any country in the world. And Yemen is like the poorest country in the world. And if this war was simply a matter of Iranian proxies or Iranian puppets, it would have been over in a week. It would have been over in a month. It would have been over in a year. But it continues. And the Houthis have continued getting stronger and stronger and stronger throughout all of this, because they have a huge base of support among the population, because they provide the services that people need, and because they tap into kind of a spiritual passion that really burns throughout these people, especially the poorer people in the northern regions. And they have just continued to inspire these people to fight heroically and relentlessly against everything that has been thrown at them. This is the David and Goliath story of the 21st century. I mean, this is like the poorest country in the world holding out against Saudi Arabia with the fourth largest military budget, backed by the United States. In 2015, U.S. Army generals were in Riyadh advising Saudi Arabia how to carry out its strikes. The USA was providing satellite support to Saudi Arabia in their military operations. And they have just continued to hold out against all odds. This is one of the most epic stories of the 21st century that we've ever seen. This is a group of people that just will not surrender. I mean, the food blockades, everything has been thrown at them, and they just keep fighting. This is a relentless group of people who have now, at this point, because they're grabbing Israeli ships and they're enforcing a naval blockade of Israel in solidarity with the Palestinians, they're now the heroes of the entire Muslim world at this point. And, one of Mao Zedong's last statements before he died, he said, "A weak nation can defeat a strong nation. A small nation can defeat a big nation, but only if they dare to rise in struggle and take up arms and grasp the destiny of their country." And I thought of that statement so much when I was on that ship to Yemen, and I think of it every time I think of Yemen, because this is something that it doesn't make sense according to any military analysis. They should have been defeated a long time ago, but they just continue to fight, and now they're going up against Israel.
Yeah, and from last I checked, they have about 70% of the country at this point under their control. And they're just kind of waiting it out until the rest of the Saudi-backed government, I suppose, collapses. And then there's also fighting with Al-Qaeda and ISIS that have joined in. not with any of those groups. They're fighting separately their own holy wars that they're trying to grab areas and to put under their own control, but they're not as successful. Their fighting force is very small, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and they're all kind of, so there's three divisions in this civil war. You've got the Al-Qaeda ISIS, you've got the Saudi-backed government, and then you have the Houthi-backed government, and the Houthi-led with what's going on there now. And they have 70% of the control.
Al-Qaeda and ISIS consider Shia Muslims to be apostates.
Right.
They argue that anyone who's a Shia they say that Shia Islam is a conspiracy by the Jews against Islam or something like that. So they hate the Houthi movement on that basis.
So that's where it gets complicated,
the ideology,
right? Because the Houthis are also fighting the ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who we're supposed to be fighting as well.
Yeah, but ISIS and Al-Qaeda, their ideology is the Saudi ideology. It's Wahhabism. Right. It is this, so, I mean, officially they're not on the same side, but, they have the same opinion of the Houthis, that they're Shia apostates, that, they're secretly agents of Iran, etc.
Right.
But, it's really not that complicated. This is a country fighting for its national liberation. And let's also be clear, the Houthis don't want to establish a Shia government for Yemen. They want autonomy because they are not the religious majority. They want the people in the South to be able to do the South Yemen thing and have socialism and secular government. They want the Sunnis in other regions to be able to do their things. They want federal autonomy. They want the right to practice their religion and carry out their beliefs in their region. And they want the rights of Yemeni people in the other regions from other ethnic and religious and cultural, beliefs to do their own thing. They want like a federal republic. Is what they're fighting for, but they want economic development. Economic development is a central part of what they're fighting for. There's an interview that they did where BBC was interviewing a Houthi leader, and they said to him, they said, well, people say that you're inspired by Iran. He said, the only reason you bring up Iran is to incite religious division. Yes, we're inspired by Iran, but we're also inspired by Venezuela. And he said, we stand with the oppressed anywhere in the world. And they identify themselves as being part of a global revolutionary movement. They're inspired by China and Mao. They're inspired by the Bolivarians of Latin America. They study the history of the IRA and the Irish freedom struggle. They view themselves as part of a global struggle against Western imperialism. That's kind of how they see themselves.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to fill in a few more gaps on this one, just so that because most people don't know much about what is going on in Yemen, the war, why it's breaking out. And a lot of people do try to compare it to what's going on with Israel and the Palestinians. It's very different. We're not talking about a group of people that were under occupation or anything of that sort. Saleh, who had been in power for about 3 decades. He was the president of northern Yemen before it became a united country then in 1990. When it became a united country, he then became the leader of a united Yemen. So he was in power for a very long time, supposedly the president, but really he was, like you mentioned, more of a dictator, almost a monarch in a way. He was planning on handing down the power to his son, right? It wasn't going to be a vote or anything like that. So he was very corrupt. At the time of his death, didn't they think he had like $36 billion? I mean, he had been siphoning money while he was in power from the Houthi people, keeping them very, very poor. They are the poorest country in the Arab world, keeping them very poor while he was making billions and billions of dollars. So there was that Arab Spring. People wanted out from under his corrupt mafia-style rule is really kind of how he was running the country. Very nepotistic, gave his family members jobs in the military, in the government, and kept everybody in his family and his inner circle very rich, while everybody else suffered. So he's really running more like a mafia or a monarchy of some sort. So he gets ousted, like you say, in the Arab Spring. He has to hand it over to his vice president. It was really a handover because, as you said, it wasn't an actual election, right? There was one guy, and they kind of handed it over to him. But
no, you're back. Oh, thank you. I love you. Hang on. Wait a second.
I want in the tail.
You do? Oh. I don't want to do that. Why is it doing that? Hello. Hello. Okay. I'll turn this back on.
At one point, there was a surprise, and that was that the Houthis who'd been fighting against him the whole time, Saleh was also a Zaidi Shia Muslim from the north. The Zaidis are 35% of the population in Yemen. So as you mentioned, they are a minority religious group. They're not the majority there. But Saleh was one of them, but he was just very corrupt. They didn't like him. And at one point, though, didn't they actually aligned with him at one point after he had to pass over his power to the vice president. They saw an opportunity that his supporters, he had a lot of military support, that they could maybe gain some military power if they partnered with Saleh, but then he ended up turning on them and they assassinated him. And they admitted it.
You do what God called you to do. You show up. You put one foot in front of the other. You have no idea what God has calling for you.
That's true.
You have no idea where you're going, and in some cases, you don't know why. But He needs you. He needs me. He needs all of us. It is God that is the answer.
We are calling all true American patriots to take back America before it's too late. You are our last hope to save this nation. As a gift for your unwavering loyalty and support, we want to give you a 100% free Trump 2024 gold coin. All you have to do is take this quick 10-second poll, and we'll ship your free gold coin to you in 3 days.
Awesome.
Your participation in the early poll could mean victory in 2024 or the complete death of America. We ask that you please do your part as a loyal MAGA patriot to click the link and take the poll now. The future of our country is at stake, and the poll only takes 5 seconds to complete. Let's stand together and take America back. Are you in?
Do you believe the Bible? And I mean really believe it. Here in Israel, we are living in the reality of God's promises.
Yeah, right.
History is full of those who thought God was through with Israel.
Let's just watch
here
this.
We are,
I want to see what
gathered
this
to
is.
the land of our
I've
forefathers after 2,000 years.
People pay me all the time.
And speaking Hebrew, a language that was dead for 1,500 years. Miraculously, we've survived attack after attack. And most remarkably of all, God is causing our people to turn back to Him in faith.
Is that what it is?
People in Israel and throughout the Middle East are hungry and thirsty for a message of hope. Our media outreach in Hebrew and Arabic is reaching millions in Israel and beyond our borders. Our evangelistic videos in Hebrew have over 1 million views a month in Israel alone. And our Hebrew Bible app is the most popular of its kind in the world. Over 20,000 people a month visit our Bible website, listening, reading, and downloading the New Testament. During this time of war, our humanitarian aid team is responding to the huge needs that have arisen. We are standing with our people, sending relief on a very large scale to those who've lost everything. At a time when the world demands everyone chooses a side, we are coming together in unity. Jewish and Arab pastors who've graduated our seminary pray and serve together to show the world the difference Yeshua makes. Our soldiers ministry has become more important and more active than ever before. We are sending daily devotionals, spiritual encouragements, and practical help to those who serve. We've seen God working in this way in every facet of our ministry.
See, they play this
These troubled times are just a preview of what's to come.
On my
but
channel.
We know there is a great harvest
and they do on Caleb's
still
as well.
to be gathered in.
So that means
God has not finished with us.
The Israel ministry.
We believe this is just the beginning. If you believe that God still has plans and purposes for Israel,
which is
this is the time to act and join with God as He carries out His words. Don't stand on the sidelines. You can play an important part in the action. Join with us and become one for Israel.
Well, what happened was that when Saudi Arabia invaded Yemen, and Yemenis were dying in mass, I mean, you said 20,000. I think it's far more than that. I mean, it's far more than that.
Well, more died from starvation, and there was a lot of other things that happened. But I think it was 20,000 in actual.
Yeah,
actual. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was in Djibouti, I saw just people who had crossed.
Hang on, I'm gonna try something. Hello. Let's see. Can I hear this? Hang on. Hello? 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 Oh! Hello. That does sound a lot better. But I'm hearing... okay. Let me try to get the volume right, and then I will turn the monitor off. Let me try that. Can I turn this up? No. Motive. Let me see. Hello? Hello? There it goes, finally. Hello? Hello? Far. Mic mode. Far. Mic mode. Far. Mic mode. Far. Far, 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 far. Well, I guess that'll work. That's close enough. That'll work. Alright, here we go. What's a manual? Mic gain. Hello. Hello. Maybe. We'll go back to auto level. Far. 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 Auto level far. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe that'll work. Does that keep it pretty right there? Okay. That's good enough. Alright. Da, 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 da. What? Wait. Maybe. What if I put it on? Compressor on. Limiter. And crank the gain all the way. I'm gonna try that. Let's see. Let's see how that works. Interact. Okay.
Over from Yemen on boats that were just desperately trying to get to Djibouti, you know, whole families that were just desperate. Please let us into the country. I mean, it's like, you know, this devastating war is happening. And Saleh, you know, despite being very corrupt and despite, you know, having kind of a shaded history, he was a bit of a nationalist, right? And when his vice president, Mansour Hadi, is bringing in the Saudi military to slaughter the people, I think Saleh said, okay, well, I'll work with these Houthis just like I'll work with the Southern movement, just like I'll work with these other people, because I want to defend my country. I just don't want to see what's happening to my country. And so the Saleh movement, which had a lot of roots in the military, there were a lot of people in the military of Yemen that were, you know, admirers of the dictator Saleh. They entered an alliance. They made a pact with the Houthis. But then, you know, I guess Saleh got bought off. And, you know, I mean, there are negotiations that go on like this, right? You know, politics is a messy business. War is a messy business. And as I will emphasize once again, they are not fighting to make all of Yemen a Shia Zaidi country. They are fighting for autonomy so that people in the different regions can do what they want, and they're fighting for economic development, to tap into those oil resources, raise the people there out of poverty, provide the services that people need. That's what they're fighting for, and they've been holding out against the forces of wealth and power, the biggest militaries in the world. I will also add that now that they're seizing these ships bound for Israel, you know, these ships, they're seizing them, and these ships have become like a tourist attraction. People from all over Yemen are going to Hodeida, and they're going to the port cities to just see these Israeli ships that the Houthis have seized and to go on them. And it is this moment of national pride here. They're thinking, we are the poorest country in the world. We've got almost nothing. But now we are playing such a pivotal role. The Palestinians are seeing us as their greatest allies. We are holding Israel accountable. The USA is scrambling to try and put together a military coalition to stop us. And for Yemenis of all religious and tribal and ethnic backgrounds, this is a huge moment of pride that they're doing this. And the whole Muslim world is just in awe of their bravery. This tiny country, this movement of poor people from the mountains are getting helicopters, and they're grabbing boats, and they're grabbing ships, and they're saying, you're not going to trade with Israel until Israel stops bombing Gaza. At this point, Saudi Arabia is, I'm sure, trying to figure out how they can negotiate some kind of peace deal, because they do not look good for fighting the Houthis, because the Houthis are the heroes of the entire Muslim world at this point.
Yeah, it puts them definitely in a precarious position, the Saudis, in the Arab world. You're absolutely right there. Now, a couple of things. From your understanding, do the Houthis want to set up I understand that they want to set up a federation where each region can kind of control itself and kind of decide on how it wants to be run. But is that not to be under an imam? From my understanding, they still do want to bring back a theocracy with an imam in charge. That would then allow this kind of autonomy within the various different regions, but still done under a theocratic umbrella. Is that not what they want to do?
That is not my understanding. My understanding is that the Southern movement, which wants to reestablish basically the communist government of Southern Yemen, and is a completely secular, atheistic current, they are aligned with the Houthis. I'm sure they would not want that. There's many Sunnis that are fighting on their side that would definitely not want a Shia imam imposed on them. There's many secular countries in the Middle East, that in their constitution, they make clear that Islam is the guiding force of the government, right? And, Syria, for example, is a secular country, but when they ratified a new constitution in 2012, it did say in the constitution that Islam is the guiding force of the Arab people. We are a secular country, but we recognize that Islam has a place. And I would imagine that something like that would definitely be part of a new Yemen. After the Saudis were kicked out of there, I can imagine that there would definitely be a certain, homage to Islam. Gaddafi was a very secular leader, but, in his green book, he does say that Islam is the brilliance of the Arab people, is the basis of his spirituality. Just kind of like here in the United States, we say, in God we trust, on our money. We have, under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. We're a secular country, but Christianity has really left a big stamp on our culture and our history here. So I can imagine that a new Yemen would definitely do that. I mean, in the Middle East, you couldn't not do that, but I don't think they're trying to impose any Shia government.
Crimes continue.
So there's a big fear that if the Houthis are taking, which they've taken over 70% of the country, and much of it right there on that western side of Yemen. So it's right at the water, and it's right where ships have got to pass to get themselves up through the Red Sea up to Israel. It's very strategic. That's why Djibouti is right there on the other side of that strait. It's a very strategic, important spot. Why China wanted to put their only military base outside of China right there to protect that strait. It's very strategic. So Yemen, though it has, I'm sure, oil resource like much of the Middle East, what it also has is strategic importance, geographical strategic importance. So there's a lot of people that want to make sure that whoever is in control of that area is friendly. And so that, don't you think that maybe has a lot to contribute to Saudi Arabia, the United States, and other countries kind of looking at the Houthis and worrying that what actually is happening right now with them seizing ships is exactly the problem? They're thinking, well, this is exactly what we were worried about, and now it's happening.
Well, it's happening because the whole world is condemning what Israel is doing in Gaza. And they, as fanatical, dedicated believers in Islam, feel that they must do something to support the Palestinians. And if the UN isn't going to do something, and if the international community is not going to take action to stop what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, bombing them around the clock, just mass death and destruction in Gaza, they've got to do something. So, I think that's why they're taking this action, but they're not stopping ships from other countries. And look, at the end of the day, the Houthis are not going away. If they were going to go away, they would have lost maybe in 2015, maybe 2016. It's 2023. It's about to be 2024. These people are going to be a big factor. So our leaders need to stop calling them terrorists. They need to stop calling them extremists and Iranian agents and talk to them and negotiate with them and treat them like a real country. They may be poor, they may live in the mountains, they may have a religion that you don't approve of, but they're going to be a big factor in Yemen for years and years to come. So if you want to keep the Red Sea safe, you need to negotiate with these people. Talk to them. Take them off the designated terrorist list, negotiate with them, reach an agreement with them. I think that would be the correct approach.
Check.
So where are we at with this now? Can you give us an update on the ships and what the Houthis have done at this point? From what we hear, there's a fleet of U.S. ships going over there to try to protect and escort ships through. What's the latest on this?
Well, I don't know if you saw, but the United States was trying to form this coalition of many different countries to go and clear out the Red Sea and make sure that Israeli ships could get through, and ships headed for Israel could get through. And it fell apart. Australia said, no, we're not interested. Spain was particularly furious because Spain actually never got asked by the United States. The USA announced they were part of the coalition without ever even talking to them. And the Biden administration is wildly embarrassed at this point because they had announced, we've got this coalition of all these different countries and we're going to go in and protect. And a number of the countries have said, no, we're not on board and we're not interested. And the Biden administration is now kind of, embarrassed. I expect they will try to do something because the Biden administration is so dedicated to protecting Israel. They're protecting them at the United Nations. They're protecting them in every possible way. So I can imagine that they probably will try to do something at some point. But it seemed like last week the USA was just on the brink of moving its forces, into the Red Sea. And now it seems like they're stalling a little bit as the coalition didn't come together as they expected.
So the Houthis are still stopping ships at this point?
Yes. Yes, they are. And and it is, it's businesses that are headed, ships that are headed to Israel to deposit goods, companies that do business with Israel, and they've got helicopters and they got their boats and they're grabbing ships.
Wow. And a lot of other ships are just not daring. They're just saying, never mind. We're not going to even try. So there's been
and the oil prices are rising. Because oil goes on oil tankers, and oil tankers tend to go through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. And, we have a situation here where this is having a big impact on the global economy. And that's what people need to understand about this, right? How many billion people are there in the world? 6 billion, 8 billion, right? But there's all these people in the world that have never been heard, that are just forgotten, and the people of Yemen, the people of northern Yemen who live in the mountains, who live in extreme poverty, they are people that the global economy has just left behind. And when the World Economic Forum is talking about depopulation and reducing the population and holding back development, they're just basically writing off all these people. They've been kind of forgotten. And now they are making themselves heard louder than the loudest clap of thunder. I mean, the whole world is hearing what the Houthis and what the people of northern Yemen are saying. They're saying, we're going to oppose Israel, we're going to grab their ships, and the whole world has to listen. And the oil prices are rising, and the global economy is shaking. And I mean, it's amazing. This is a case of the poorest people in the world saying, we will not be forgotten, we will not be ignored, we want economic development, we want control of our country, we will be heard.
What are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting how this little rebel group from the mountains has been able to take a majority control over the country, and as you said, get to this place of power where they're now in the middle of this conflict, controlling a lot of the aspects of it. When they first started doing that, I thought, oh, this is a bad idea for the Palestinians, because that particular strait, once you start messing with economics, countries start to get really upset. They don't care if they agree with you or not. They're thinking, hey, you're messing with us now. So I thought, well, you're going to get a lot of countries that are going to start getting nervous that the Houthis are able to do this, that, if they could show that kind of might, that it might actually cause other countries to be against them and join in on the war, not because they care about Palestine, Israel, but just because they care about that strait. They care about the economics and those merchant ships being able to get through. But maybe the rest of the world is saying, well, hey, somebody's got to do it because it's just the United States and Israel who are aligned. The rest of the countries are not. That has been made clear in the latest votes at the UN Security Council and at the United Nations. And maybe the rest of the world is saying, you know what? Okay, that's what happens. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it kind of looks that way. It kind of looks like actually their strategy is working in a way, rather than what I thought might happen, which is that the world turns against the Houthis, and it could just make things worse for them. It's a gamble, when you do something like that. It's a total gamble. You just don't know. And they do have a lot of problems in Yemen. They should be focused on their people. And do you know how that's going with the starvation? I mean, there was some mass famine. It was really, really atrocious what was going on in Yemen, the blockades by Saudi Arabia and the United States. How is that today?
I want to go back to something that you said before when you talked about, Israel and the way that they're reacting to this and the fact that they're not able to rally the global community.
Yeah.
The strategy of the Obama administration has completely failed. Barack Hussein Obama, he was very much an attempt to get the Muslim world to believe the United States was their friend. And to polarize the Muslim world between Sunnis and Shias, to polarize the Muslim world against Iran, right? If you looked at what happened in Syria, the way the Arab Spring went, imagine if George W. Bush had been president during the Arab Spring. How would things have played out? We'd have like 6 different Irans right now. But because Barack Hussein Obama, who went to a Muslim school, wink, wink, met with Edward Said, wink, wink, he says he's not a Muslim, but the conservatives are always calling him one, and he doesn't like Netanyahu because he was leading the country. The Arab Spring was actually manipulated in the favor of the United States. It brought down Gaddafi, and they were able to set up for a regime change war against Libya. They were able to then destabilize Syria with civil war. And that the propaganda coming out from U.S. allies throughout the Middle East during the Obama administration was that Iran is trying to take over the world, that there's a Shia crescent is trying to be built, and it was a strategy of the USA kind of courting some elements in the Muslim world and using them against the Hezbollah forces in Lebanon, against Syria, against Libya and Gaddafi, and against Iran. And that was the strategy. And it continued under the Trump administration. Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia, and he said he was going to build an Arab NATO against Iran. You remember this? The whole strategy was that they were going to divide the Muslim world, and people talk about how Israel has been planning this for a long time, the Oded Yanan plan, and there was an email that was leaked from Hillary Clinton where she said a Sunni-Shia war might be beneficial to Israel, and that was clearly the strategy, was polarize the Muslim world, divide the Muslims between those that are friendly to Saudi Arabia and those that are friendly to Iran. And that has completely failed. At this point, Iran and Saudi Arabia have diplomatic relations again. They are friendly with each other again. They're negotiating with each other again. And the entire Muslim world, Sunnis and Shias, westernized Muslims and more conservative Muslims, they're all supporting the Palestinians against Israel. And everything that the Obama administration was trying to achieve has just completely flopped. And now we have a situation where Netanyahu, it seems like he is determined in any way possible to turn this crisis that's taking place right now into an all-out war against Iran. The murder of the Iranian general in Syria recently, Iran is going to have to retaliate. If you kill a top general of a country, they're going to have to retaliate. And that it seems like Netanyahu is determined to push this crisis full speed ahead into a war against Iran. But the strategy of polarizing the Muslim world against Iran has completely flopped. And so if there were to be an Israeli attack on Iran, the entire Muslim world would be on Iran's side at this point because Israel is seen as the main enemy. And so, I mean, this is not a strategic moment for the United States and Israel to escalate against Iran because Iran and allies of Iran, people that are sympathetic to Iran around the world, like Hezbollah, like the Houthis in Yemen, like the democracy movement in Bahrain, the Shia majority in Bahrain that are, have been protesting for their rights against the Saudi-imposed king. The Iranian-aligned forces around the world, because they are proving themselves by being so supportive of the Palestinians right now, they have a huge amount of sympathy. So the balance has really shifted, but yet Netanyahu seems determined to push this into an all-out fight against Iran. And I worry about the implications of this because, Israel does have a huge stockpile of nuclear weapons. It's the worst kept secret in history. We know that from all kinds of revelations that have come out through the years. They won't admit they have nuclear weapons, but they do. And if they were to attack Iran, Iran has the capability of just unloading a huge amount of missiles onto Tel Aviv. And Hezbollah has the same capability in Lebanon, and Israel has nuclear weapons, and this could all spin out of control very, very, very quickly. And it seems like Netanyahu is determined to drag the world into World War III. It's not enough to have this horrendous crisis and all this killing going on in Gaza. He wants World War III, and I think that common sense should prevail and, that he should be restrained. And I'm kind of shocked by the Biden administration just continuing to pander to what looks like a desperate attempt to spark World War III. What do you think?
I'm treating this like a murder case. But some questions just don't have answers.
Well, I mean, the United States is doing right now what the United States has always done, and they kind of are, I think the Biden administration's a bit in shock. Quite honestly, what's always worked in the past is just to support Israel blindly. It didn't, and that really sort of, that the rest of the world oftentimes would also support Israel, a lot of the Western world. And that was just kind of the way it was. That was the status quo. And suddenly it's not. And I just think they're taken off guard. And I think that they are thinking, well, what do we do now? This isn't normal. Normally, we side with Israel and everybody else does too. And it's all good. And we just keep on going. And then this one ends and there's a period of peace. And then when the next one flares up, hopefully I won't be around. It'll be the other president's problem. So I think they're taken off guard. They don't know how to react to this. They don't know how to react to the fact that the rest of the world has changed because largely the internet. I mean, the internet and the Palestinians having access to the internet to upload videos to show what's really going on rather than what we just get, from mainstream media and, when news organizations would go in, but only with Israel, with the IDF, and only get the IDF side of things. And that's what they showed us. Now people are starting to see the reality of what's really going on there and starting to think critically. The younger generation's older now. Boomers, they were born from World War II, and there has been, rightfully, for many, many decades, a real sympathy for the Jewish people, for what happened after the Holocaust, a real sympathy. And that sympathy was enough for a long time to keep people very much in support of Israel, just believing that, well, we must do this thing. They must have a home, and we can't allow a Holocaust to happen again. But the younger generations that didn't grow up with that, I think more put into them by their parents or their education system, right? They're now far removed from the World War II generation, and they're looking at things more critically without the emotion. And when they look at it that way,
was
they see
World War II?
The reality of what's happening to the Palestinians.
Was that the one?
You know, there's a big uprising. People are saying, well, this is wrong. You can't basically annex people for 50 to 75 years and not give them rights. You know, just to keep them oppressed and refuse to give them citizenship, refuse to give them equal rights, or refuse. And if
my
you don't
computer is going
to
die.
Annex them completely and make them all Israelis.
I'm going
then
to
you need to give them their own nation and allow them total complete self-autonomy. Not this kind of pseudo fake crap that they were doing, which really wasn't a nation. You know, they were offering them basically native reservations, is what they were without the, you know, our natives in this country. They're given reservations that they can run, but they're also allowed to leave those reservations, live anywhere in the country. They're given American citizenship and full rights, and they don't have to live on those reservations if they don't want to. That's not what's happened for the Palestinian people at all in these reservations that they've essentially been given. And it's all been, you know, all of this refusal to give them that citizenship has been done under the guise of, well, under the defense of, and what the Israelis have used all these years is, well, they want their own nation and we're negotiating, right? They want their own land and we're negotiating. So they've been allowed to draw this out, and people just see it now for what it is. And they say, this is wrong. You cannot do this for 3 generations of people, 4 generations of people, going into 5 generations. Denying them those basic equal human rights. But so yeah, the world. So I think the Biden administration is just taken totally off guard. They do not know what to do. They've just been sticking to 75 years of status quo, and now they're like, oh shit, what now? You know. And it's a good question.
The drama at the Ivy League schools I find to be particularly ironic because, you know, if you read the writings of Zbigniew Brzezinski and the American strategists, they talk about the Ivy League schools and how valuable they are. That, you know, people from all over the world go to Harvard and Yale and Princeton and schools like that, and they come there and they see that the United States is so great and they love the United States, and they go back to their home country and they're, you know, proxies of American power, and they favor the United States. They echo U.S. foreign policy in their home countries. So it is essential for the Americans, from just like a strategic, you know, perspective, to have Harvard be a place where it shows that, yes, there are Americans that don't agree with supporting Israel. Yes, there are Muslim Americans who openly practice their faith, who disagree with U.S. foreign policy. That's in U.S. interest, right? That they almost create kind of a Potemkin village, right? The image that you get of the United States at politically correct Harvard is not what America is really like, right? Yeah. But they need that. But Israel's not okay with that. No, Israel says, no, you cannot have Harvard University criticize Israel. And that doxing truck they were driving around with the faces of students who dared sign a petition, and now the calling for the firing of the president of Harvard. You know, Harvard plays an international role for the United States. There are students there from Africa. There are students there from the Middle East. There are students there from the Pacific, from Muslim countries like Malaysia and Indonesia. And all of them are going to go back to their own country and say, wow, on an American campus, if you disagree with Israel, they drive around with your face on a truck and try to make sure you can never get a job again. This is actually kind of hurting the United States in the long term. But Israel just feels so entitled. No, U.S. policy must completely serve Israel. How many states are there where in order to be a state employee, you must sign a pledge that you will never boycott Israel? Yeah. Is there any other country that gets that kind of special treatment?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's really, truly insane. That in particular is so against the First Amendment. I don't know how that hasn't been challenged in court. Maybe it is. It should be challenged, I think, more in court. You bring up a really good point about the universities. They are a politically strategic for the United States foreign policy because many of the world leaders that we install all around in these coups, we brought first to the United States, right, and educated them in these Ivy League schools, Columbia or wherever, and then we send them back to their countries and then say, well, this is the guy that we want, right? We want one Dwight out, or we want, whoever it is in Syria. These are the people that we're backing, even though they were, and a lot of them they bring here to kind of educate or train or indoctrinate, and then
Mom
to
is
send them back
having
and try to have them act
too
as
much
puppets in the government.
fun.
So it is kind of an interesting, what is going on with those Ivy League schools. And I don't agree with a lot of what's going on in Ivy Leagues. They've definitely, over the last several years, have been anti-free speech. And now
I think this would work fine.
It's again another crackdown on free speech.
If I
with
just
what's
talked
happening now.
right here.
But Caleb, it's been really great talking to you. You're always so knowledgeable.
I need a boom
really
arm.
fascinating story with you on this boat. That was, you're part of history, trying to get yourself to Yemen for those with those humanitarian supplies. Unfortunately, we're not able to get there. The people in Yemen, it is a major crisis what has happened in Yemen. The civil war has been the greatest humanitarian catastrophe. Very different, though. I want to stress this because a lot of people keep saying, well, why are people so focused on Palestine and not on Yemen? Many were. I mean, Yemen. It's a bit different. There's not there's not the occupation and the oppression and the blockade like what's gone on in Palestine. It's a very different situation, but it is bad. Many of us are very against sanctioning and blockading in general. That's why I'm not. I get what the Houthis are doing right now with the ships, but at the same time, I am against sanctioning and blockading. So I'm not really for what the Houthis are doing if it's going to harm the Israeli civilians. I don't think it's a good thing. But I do think that the Netanyahu government, the United States, everybody needs to correct course before it gets even worse than it already is. But Caleb, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
How can people find more? What are you working on right now? You always got so much stuff going on. What are you working on, and where can people find you?
Oh, well, I am the founder of an educational project. We're called the Center for Political Innovation. You can check out our website, cpiusa.org. I've written a number of books about, economics and global international relations, geopolitics. You can look at, the various books I've published. And I'm very excited about the upcoming Defeat the Deep State rally, Rage Against the War Machine 2. It's going to be happening in Washington, D.C. on February 17th. I think that's going to be a great development. So, yeah, and, the Center for Political Innovation, we're always putting on conferences and events around the country, publishing books, trying to raise awareness about how imperialism and this global system of monopoly capitalism doesn't really benefit the American people. And if you're a real patriot, if you really, follow the teachings of the Bible and the Christian faith, you should oppose a system that puts profits over people.
Caleb, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you guys waiting for us to come back from the holiday vacation. I hope you guys had a great one. We will be back again tomorrow night with another great show, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Until next time, guys, have a great night. Bye-bye.
Okay, well, that went well. Let's switch this.
I'm Jeff Bezos.
Shut up,
what is your
Jeff
claim to fame?
Bezos.
I'm the founder of Amazon.com.
From the award-winning producers of The Facebook Dilemma.
Richest guy in the world.
Frontline investigates Amazon.
Refresh. Current page. What?
So brazen. And, Anya Parnpil, our colleague at the Grayzone, she tweeted out this clip of CNN anchor Aaron Burnett basically doing what any U.S. anchor is obligated to do when the U.S. bombs a Middle Eastern country,
See if I can go
or any country, but I think especially...
Let's go all the way back.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Grayzone. It's Friday night.
if you guys like this,
really momentous week,
let me know,
and
I'll
whole
do
lot
it
ahead.
more often. This is what I do anyway.
We're in World War III. We've been in World War III.
A lot of the time,
so maybe World War IV is
I just
about to
don't
start.
stream it online.
We're live on Rockfin now.
I
I'm here
listen
with
to politics
award-winning Canadian
while I
journalist
play
Aaron
Fortnite.
Mate. Aaron, how's it going?
I figured,
how's it going, Max? How's it going, everybody?
Why not
Thanks
share
for joining
it?
us. If you're
Maybe
watching
there'll
this
be
live,
some kids that like
please
Fortnite,
like the stream so we can beat
and they
the
can be
inevitable
exposed to
algorithmic
some
suppression.
Quality.
We have so much to talk about today.
There's
so much going on. Biden all of a sudden expanding the war zone to Yemen with these strikes on multiple areas targeting Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis. And you also have this historic ICJ hearing, which I know, Max, you have a lot to say.
Well, we do. Both, anybody should have a lot to say.
I have 3% battery.
We'll break down.
I'm gonna let this charge. I'm gonna take a shower, and then I'm gonna
we of
come
course
back
have an update
and do
on the saga
Joe
of
Biden killed Gonzalo
allegations
Lira
put out by Israel
stream
supporters, including the New York Times,
in like 2
a
hours.
systemic pattern of sexual violence by Hamas on October 7th, a story that continues to collapse. And you put out, Max, a piece this week on the Grayzone, which detailed in exhaustive fashion the glaring problems with the New York Times story. I helped you out a little bit, and you were generous enough to give me a co-byline, but this really was your work, and it's an incredible piece of journalism. And we're going to talk about that too, as well as another great act of journalism you did, which was confronting the State Department directly about the ICJ genocide hearing, and asking them point blank whether Tony Blinken is personally concerned about his complicity and his potential exposure to the same charges that South Africa wants to bring against Israel.
Well, thank you for saying that. I actually think I'm actually still putting together some elements for this stream as we speak, but I actually think that it would be great if we got to that. But this story in Ynet, Yediot Aharonot, by none other than Ronan Bergman.
Oh, if my computer dies,
at least as
you can
significant,
support the
and
stream.
we
There's
should
some
cover
links
that
in the
first, 'cause
description.
We were supposed, not first in the
you don't
stream. I
have
think
to.
we should.
I'm just glad you're
should
here.
do Yemen and ICJ, but before we even get back to the New York Times and this Hamas mass rape propaganda, we were attacked and called conspiracists for raising questions about friendly fire deaths on October 7th. And of course, the Washington Post was preparing a hit piece, and then bam, the most popular paper in Israel with its national security correspondent, Ronan Bergman, who also is a contributor and editor at the New York Times, drops this piece about Hannibal directive orders from the top. More evidence to support what we've been saying almost from the beginning. So we'll get to that as well. I think we should start with ICJ because, you know, while Yemen is really dominating the news cycle right now, we shouldn't get distracted from the importance of this case, and whether it's intentionally or not, it has distracted from it, and that's unfortunate. It kind of reminds me almost of when the Palestine Papers came out back in, I believe, 2011, showing the Palestinian Authority offering Israel, almost begging Israel to take, in the words of the PA's negotiator, Saeb Erekat, like a negotiator for life, the largest Yerushalayim in history, and this devastating expose
I don't really
leak
like
of
those
documents
medals.
exposing the PA.
They show
The Arab
everybody
Spring
where
just
you
started
are.
like that day, the so-called Arab Spring, and it just wiped that away from the news cycle. So I don't want things to get lost. What did you think, first of all? I don't know if you watched Israel's defense today, but what did you think of South Africa's presentation?
Well, it was moving. You know, first of all, this historic victim of apartheid coming forward to defend another victim of apartheid, and the added symbolism of the fact that during the apartheid era in South Africa, Israel and the U.S. were basically among its top foreign allies. The U.S., you know, claimed to follow the arms embargo on South Africa, but never really followed it. And when they really wanted to get around it, they could rely on Israel to sell South Africa weapons and even try to give it nuclear secrets. And so the fact that South Africa liberated itself from apartheid, despite the best efforts of Israel and the U.S., and then can now bring a case against Israel charging the genocide against the apartheid colony that it rules over, the occupied territories. That was very moving. And South Africa, they don't have any interest in doing this. They don't gain anything from this except for global support from people with no power. But it's not as if the people of Palestine can offer South Africa anything. So it was amazing to see a state act selflessly and present such a meticulous case. They obviously really, really prepared for it and put forward I think an irrefutable argument, and did so really respectfully. They went out of their way to not try to, appeal to people emotionally by showing videos of all the horror in Gaza, just by presenting the cold, hard facts, including the genocidal statements of so many Israeli officials.
Yeah. The intent to commit genocide is always the most difficult thing to prove in any genocide case. And here I think we have historically the most plentiful evidence in history, partly because of the advanced state of technology, social media, and the promiscuity of Israeli soldiers in Gaza in broadcasting their war crimes. An extremely parochial national group that speaks a language that few people in the world speak, who thinks that they're only speaking to one another, broadcasting their war crimes to the world, not realizing other people can translate what they say, and view them blowing up homes in honor of their daughter's second birthday as actually disgusting and not something to be proud of. And so these figured prominently along with the statements of Israeli leadership in South Africa's presentation. As I predicted the night before, the night before South Africa presented its case that Israel has the potential to commit genocide, the word Amalek, the term Amalek, the biblical term Amalek, which we'll talk about in a second, would figure at the heart of its presentation. This is South Africa's Tembeka Nguka Toby. Hopefully I got that somewhat right. Who is a 47-year-old lawyer from South Africa laying out the case.
There is an extraordinary feature in this case, that Israel's political leaders